I totally isolated myself from everybody.
Then I guess Kyler's been using meth now. Like, what are you thinking?
Kyler, stop and talk to me.
This is right now, we are on the line with director Eva Wunderman, directing a documentary, Aftermeth, a family story, screening on this Thursday, November 1st. And also documentaries on the legacy of Trunk Lagoon, where actually received Eva received a Leo Award for Best Director and Gemini Award for winning television series Weird Homes, produced and directed Crystal Clear for the CBC's The Passionate Eye, which earned Gracie Allen Individual Achievement Award in New York. Thank you, Eva, so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Oh, thank you.
You follow the story, the journey of one family that you initially had first contact with 10 years ago.
Yes, it is actually 10 years ago now. That's when I was first introduced to the problem of crystal meth. When I was, because I lived in Hope for quite a while, and the principal at the school, at the alternate school here, actually phoned me and asked if I could do something about the issue of crystal meth that they could show in the school. And at the time, I didn't know very much about it, but I did research and talked to people that I knew, and I found out that this was a much larger problem than just doing a little video for the school. So that's when I approached CBC, who commissioned me to do this documentary. And over the course of 2-3 years, I followed 3 families at the time who had kids on crystal meth, and it was quite a journey. And one of the families, the Webb family, had a son, Aaron, who at the time that I started shooting had been on crystal meth up and down for more than 7 years and was quite affected by this. And when I finished shooting, he was on a downward slide, so it was quite emotional. And over the years since we finished that film, people have always asked me, how is he doing and what's going on with the family? And of course I didn't know, but after 5 years, Knowledge Network, Murray Battle, who is producer there, commissioned me to do a follow-up for their strand Storyville and see how specifically the Webb family, what happened to them. So that's what I've been doing, and so the whole story actually starts 5 years later. But like you say, after all the time that I've been following them now, it's 10 years from the beginning of working with this. So this is the story of him and what happened, his mother and siblings.
You were living at Hope in the time and still are. The principal of the high school approached you. We talked before the interview. You were totally blown away. Most of the families in the community had a family member or known someone or was connected to someone in some way that were crystal meth addicts.
Well, I would say, I mean, I don't think that had specifically, I won't say that Hope had any more or less problem than anywhere else. You know, I just think that if you're not really in that, you weren't aware of what was happening. But I think when I first started talking to CBC, by the way, they said to me, because they're back east in Toronto, and they said, oh, it must be a Hope problem. And I said, no, because what happened, I also traveled down to Oregon, and I went on trips, and every local paper had something about crystal meth at the time. So I was adamant, and then they said, oh, it must be a West Coast problem. And anyway, it's interesting to see how this problem grew and how it hit different places in the world and how people became more aware of it after this whole thing started. Because I think it's the kind of drug it is that really can be hurtful to the brain and what. I mean, it depends on the quality, of course, of the person. After what I learned from my research, but it is a very, very terrible drugs that can really ruin people's lives. So I think that's why I felt the awareness have to go out there, because especially to young kids, because I spoke to kids at the time that tried it for the first time when they were 9. And I think you need to kind of get the awareness of how difficult it could be to get out of it, and how it can ruin your brain in so many ways. So I think now it's become more knowledge about meth in the communities, but at that time it wasn't really. And I think it was. I hope that this has helped a bit. And Aaron, who I now saw 5 years later, I found out that because of seeing himself in this documentary, he stopped using, and that's such a wonderful feeling to have done that. I think that only that would make it worth my while to have done this documentary. And that's what he says in this show, that, you know, he didn't realize he was such a douchebag. That's what he says.
yeah, I read that on the website.
Yeah, and that's wonderful to see. And he's really, really doing very well. Of course, at the time that I now started this, 5 years after the other one was made, because he was doing so well, I'm thinking, well, where are we going? You know, what's happening with this? Because now I'm going to follow the family for another 2 years. It was not supposed to be that long, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's over 2 years, I think. So, but it took all sorts of twists and turns at the time that I was working with them, which was in the documentary, of course. But I think still it has a very strong message and a hopeful future for so many people, because one of the things I felt when I did the first one was that there was no way of recovering after being on the crystal meth for 7 years. That was my feeling, that, you know, it affects you in a negative way, that no matter what, it's going to hurt you and your ability to do things. But now I've changed my mind, and I hope that other people who see this, who might have people or dear ones and loved ones and people they know who are deep into this addiction, to know that there is hope, you know. So that's how I hope this documentary will leave a message after the fact, and it's very much due to Aaron's performance, but also his brother, which you will see in the documentary.
Yeah, it must be very gratifying for you, like, because Aaron, you know, watching the first documentary act, he got to see how it affected every member of his family in a negative way, in a very negative way, and then he decided, you know, he had to quit, he had to change his lifestyle. When you're, you know, shooting a documentary, like in this case, a family, is there kind of a balance you want to maintain of not being close, intimate with a family, and being objective? The distance, how much distance how close or how far do you want to be to maintain a certain objectivity when you're shooting?
Well, I think what happens, first of all, there has to be a trust. And I think if anything, I find this a challenge that I enjoy in a way, to be able to work with people and bring out the best. When I say that, it's obviously I wouldn't show something that somebody really didn't want me to show. I mean, this is a documentary. This is not trying to be sensational in any way at all. So I do make them feel comfortable in the way that if something happens in front of the camera that they really don't want to show, I'm not going to put it in there. That said, I think if there is a very strong reason that it should be in there, I often discuss it with them and make them see why and how it can help, or whatever the reason is. So obviously when something really powerful happens, you really, as a filmmaker, want to get it into the show. And so that's how that works. Of course, it's also a challenge to be there at the right moment when something happens, because you never know. So it's more or less asking permission to be there when you know they're going to do something that is interesting, maybe to just be there as a fly on the wall kind of thing. And then sometimes things happen that you didn't expect, and I guess that's where the story evolves into something that you're not making the story. You can't make a structure ahead of time in this kind of documentary. You might have certain wishes, but you never know what's going to happen. And I find that I know my cameraman, he often says, you're so lucky. How could you have this and this happen while we were shooting? And I'm thinking, well, it's also making them feel comfortable at the same time as you might think, if they're going to go to this meeting or meet up with this person, it might be an interesting situation. So, but of course you shoot a lot of footage that doesn't go into the production. I mean, it's a lot of work in editing.
So many versions of the film that can manifest or be created. How creative is the editing process? Because there's things you cut out and decided not to put in the film, and there's definitely many incarnations of the film that you probably put on the side and that actually could be screening this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a very long process because you have to first of log all your footage that you have so you know all the shots, and you have to structure it. And of course there are different character developments, so you sort of do that after the fact and know what you have, and you have to really see where do you want this to go and how is it going to end. Personally, I work a lot on the opening, that I want to really set up the story, and when I feel that, oh yeah, this works, I also like to work on the ending and feel like, okay, this really structure it. Then I structure the middle in a different way, but everybody works differently, I guess. And of course, sometimes it's painful because you can't, if you're going to do a 1-hour show, you only have so many minutes that you can use. And there are scenes that you really have to cut out of there at the end of the day that never gets in there because of the time frame. But you also want to keep it moving and for the viewer to be part of this journey of finding out different situations as we go along, because by the time you finish shooting, you know what is happening, but you want to give that same emotion as you had yourself while you were in the middle of it, not knowing what's going to happen next.
There is still that kind of main objective, what you want to get across to the audience, kind of striving for the audience to connect to, having the audience connect to the story, have it affect them, raise their consciousness about this issue. Music, scores, how important are they? How important were they to you? And was it kind of a conscious decision to seek out certain kind of music to have in your documentary?
Well, yeah, no, I think music is very important because it sets the feeling. And John Cosrud is the person that did the score for this film. Also, Aaron is a musician, so it's great to use his own music. So a lot of it is his stuff. And yeah, even though John used what was very good, he was great at just incorporate his score with the style that fits in with the times that actually the music is Aaron's own music. And the interesting thing is in Crystal Fear, he had just more or less started playing the guitar because we gave him an opportunity to go and record some of his songs, but of course at that time he was really into the crystal meth, and we never actually finished that recording, I think. But he had so much good comments from the guy that did the recording, how talented he was just learning by himself and all this influence. So now it was kind of fun to see that he actually got into the music in a much larger way and playing with a band, and you see some of that in the documentary. And like I said, the rest of the score is there from John Cosrud, and I think it fits. I'm happy with what he did there.
You have a link to a website, www.aftermeth.ca, where there's updates of each member of the family.
Yes, they all wrote a blog of their life, so you can go onto that website. I'm not sure if it will be continuing because it all depends on their incorporation and if they have the time to continue some of this. But hopefully there will be some more communication on the web there with them.
And the documentary Aftermeth, a family story, directed by Eva Wunderman, will be screening this Thursday. Yeah, screens at 7:30 p.m. This Thursday, November 1st at the Hope Theater. Broadcast premiere on the Knowledge Network Tuesday, November 6th at 9 p.m. And repeat. Check the schedule again. It might probably midnight this same night, November 6th. We were just speaking to director Eva Wunderman for the documentary Aftermeth, a Family Story. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview.
Well, thanks for having me.
Kyler, we worry about you and we all love you and we don't like seeing what you're doing to yourself.
Well, that completely threw my life right up. The other lifestyle, which it has to it, was more appealing than working.
Get out and don't come back ever!
I feel so bad for doing that to my mom because it ruined her life. So not only did it affect me, but everybody around me too.